Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start from Germany, where at least 11 people, including the gunman, have been killed after two separate shootings at shisha bars in the western city of Hanau. Police say 5 others were wounded after gunmen opened fire in the city center and the KHALILZAD neighborhood. Police say the gunman was found dead in a house along with body of a second man. The motives behind the shootings remain unclear as further investigations are underway. Police sealed off 2 streets in the city of Hanau.
Obviously, when we enter into the investigation of such an event, then we are going to do controls on people, and that leads to us arresting people. But so far, we have made no arrests that we can clearly connect to this event.
Moving on, Prime Minister Imran Khan says the resolution of the Kashmir issue is essential for peace and stability in South Asia. Meeting a delegation of British MPs in Islamabad, Khan called on the international community to help stop Indian atrocities in Kashmir. The Prime Minister reiterated Islamabad's commitment to supporting the Kashmiri people in their struggle for justice. UK MB Debbie Abraham said India should reciprocate Pakistan's openness over the Kashmir issue. She said India has repeatedly denied permission to visit occupied Kashmir. Abrahams, along with other British MPs, were deported by India despite having valid visas. These MPs have been vocal about the human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir. The humanitarian crisis in occupied Kashmir is getting worse due to the continuous lockdown in the valley. All lines of communication from the valley to the outside world are cut, and people are virtually living under house arrest. Now, New Delhi is also cracking down on internet users, making it almost impossible for doctors to maintain a correspondence with their patients. More in this report.
Occupied Kashmir has been under a curfew and communications blackout since India stripped the region of its autonomy 200 days ago. This has had a dramatic effect on the lives of the valley's 8 million residents. With calls outside occupied Kashmir blocked and intensifying curbs on the internet, life has been brought to a standstill. This includes doctors who can no longer consult with specialists outside the valley or order life-saving medicines.
Amongst the patients that were under my care, I know that 2 patients died. And had we had access to basic communications such as mobile phones, landlines or internet, we would probably have been able to save their lives, or at the very least, prolong their lives.
The communications blackout is also hindering the scheduling of surgeries, leading to deadly consequences for some patients.
Before August, doctor gave me the prescription. On the prescription background, the company will authorize me to give drugs because it's very costly drugs. Since there was no WhatsApp, I couldn't send them the prescription by WhatsApp because no net is working. And also, I could not send them by courier. And they insist me to come to Delhi or Chennai. And I couldn't go there because I couldn't afford it.
One local resident has lost his uncle as a direct consequence of the blackout.
Because of telephone shutdown, it was very difficult. Whenever we took Haji Sahib to any doctor, they would say that they needed to send WhatsApp message to Delhi. But that was not possible, all because there was no telephone service available.
Occupied Kashmir is full of similar stories. Global rights advocacy group Access Now says India has cut the internet over 270 times from 2012 to 2019. 104 of these shutdowns took place last year. This has made India the global leader in internet censorship.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the risk of Pakistan being placed in the FATF's blacklist is now over. Talking exclusively to Indus News in Islamabad, Qureshi hopes Pakistan's efforts against terror financing and money laundering will also get the country out of the FATF's grey list. More in this report by our correspondent Isa Naqvi.
As the Financial Action Task Force plenary session continues in Paris to discuss money laundering and terror financing issues, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad has made significant progress on the plan of action decided with the Asia-Pacific group of the Financial Action Task Force.
This government, since we've been into office, have taken concrete steps which were recognized and acknowledged in the face-to-face meeting in Beijing.
Expressing confidence that the country is back in the FATF's good books, the Foreign Minister said India's designs to push Pakistan into the organization's blacklist have failed.
One thing is very clear, that the Indian design to push Pakistan into the blacklist has failed because of the very obvious steps the government of Pakistan has taken.
Qureshi said Pakistan's delegation led by Hamad Azhar has already given its presentation in the FATF plenary session.
The legislation undertaken, the amendment of rules that took place, the conviction against certain individuals and organizations, the fact that bank accounts were frozen, the fact that assets of certain proscribed organizations were overtaken. This was the presentation of our delegation led by Hamad Azhar.
China, Turkey and Malaysia have already announced their support for Pakistan at the FATF. The FATF is an intergovernmental organization founded in 1989 to develop policies against money laundering. Reporting for Indus News, Isa Naqvi, Islamabad.
U.S. Special Envoy for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad has met Afghan President Ashraf Ghani in Kabul to discuss the Taliban deal on reduction of violence. The meeting came after Ghani was declared winner of the disputed presidential polls held in September last year. In a statement, the Afghan presidential palace said Ghazni briefed Khalilzad on his meetings with local stakeholders. It said Ghani shared his views on how the Afghan government will handle the peace process. The statement said Khalilzad briefed Ghani on steps that will be taken after the agreement comes into force. Meanwhile, Ghani's main rival, Abdullah, who came second in the presidential polls, has threatened a new political turmoil in the country. In China, 114 people have died in the last 24 hours from the new coronavirus, bringing the death toll to 2,118. The National Health Commission says nearly new 600 cases have reported in Wuhan, bringing the number of infected people to over 74,000. More in this report.
The death toll from the Delhi coronavirus has risen every day since it first appeared in late December in Hubei province, China. Today, health officials in Iran say 2 elderly people have died from the virus in the city of Qom, the outbreak's first fatalities in the Middle East. In Japan, state media says 2 passengers have died on a quarantined passenger ship moored in Yokohama. Following the US, UK, Canada, and Australia, Hong Kong too has now removed its citizens from the vessel.
After coordination with the staff of the Chinese embassy in Japan and a team sent by the Hong Kong government, the procedures have been smooth and we were able to bring 106 Hong Kong residents back.
Against a backdrop of rising hysteria surrounding the COVID-19 virus, the World Health Organization has praised progress made in the struggle against it. Inevitably, World Health Organization officials criticize social media misinformation, saying there is no evidence the virus was produced in a lab or as a biological weapon.
There is no evidence that this virus was produced in a laboratory, and certainly no evidence that it was produced as a biological weapon. COVID-19 is what's called a coronavirus. It's a class of viruses that are primarily what we call zoonotic, that they come from the animal kingdom.
China says it is confident that it can win the fight against the coronavirus with the support of the international community.
We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. The United Nations says the conflict in northwest Syria has forced people to flee from homes in horrendous conditions. During a Security Council briefing, the head of UN Humanitarian Affairs, Mark Lowcock, said the unfolding catastrophe in Idlib has overwhelmed aid efforts. Lowcock said people are riding on trucks in below freezing temperatures because they have no safe place to go. The UN aid chief repeated the call for an immediate ceasefire and international humanitarian law to be respected in Syria. The international body has urged Turkey and Russia to reduce conflict in Idlib. The UN envoy for Syria, Geir Peterson, said as sponsors of the Idlib de-escalation plan, Turkey and Russia must find a way to calm the situation. The continuing offensive has displaced 900,000 people since last December. As friction rises between Ankara and the Assad regime in northwestern Syria, more and more Syrians are turning to Turkish currency in what is being seen as a sign of growing Turkish influence in the country. More in this report.
Last month, the Syrian pound plummeted to a new low, crashing through 1,000 to the dollar. This was the last straw for Azaz-based bakery owner Hassam Shamo, who found it increasingly difficult to do business using such a low-value denomination. Now, he only accepts the Turkish lira.
Because of the diversity of the prices and value of the Syrian currency, a decision has been made to deal with the Turkish lira because they're available in the country and each citizen can benefit from it. For us as workers, it's better to deal with the Turkish currency.
It's a practical move, allowing Shamo to sell a bag of bread for 1 lira. If he was still accepting the local currency, it would cost hundreds of Syrian pounds. Frequent fluctuation in the denomination's value complicates things even further.
It's better to deal with the Turkish currency, but the problem is that 80% of the people are still using the Syrian pound. We're against it because of the Assad regime. The problems I have to obtain 1 Turkish lira to get a bag of bread. No one will agree to exchange the currency.
And it's not just bakers who have abandoned the Syrian currency. Even dwellers are turning to the Turkish lira.
Following a meeting of the Jewelers Association, we decided to use the Turkish lira in the city of Azaz because of the US dollar and gold's ounce witnessed a limited increase for $10 to $20 in a week or 2 weeks. So a change has happened, but the use of the Syrian pound has deteriorated.
The regime in Damascus has threatened people using foreign currencies with jail sentences. But local authorities in Azaz have recognized the impracticality of the Syrian pound, turning a blind eye to businesses using the Turkish lira. This is just another sign of Turkey's growing presence in the war-torn country.
In Iraq, Prime Minister-designate Tawfiq Alawi says he has selected a cabinet of political independence. In a televised address, he called on Parliament to hold a session next week to give his cabinet a vote of confidence. Alawi said he will investigate the killing of protesters when he becomes Prime Minister. He pledged his government will bring the perpetrators to justice. The Prime Minister also promised to hold an early election free from the influence of money, weapons and foreign interference.
We will work on bringing back our nation's prestige and will take the necessary procedures to hold early, free and fair elections, far from the influence of money, weapons and outside interventions.
In Somalia, Al-Shabaab militants have killed 12 government soldiers and briefly captured a military base in southern Mogadishu. A military officer said the base commander was injured in the attack. Police said the El Salini base was hit by a suicide bombing, allowing gunmen to storm in. The military recaptured the base upon arrival of the reinforcements. Al-Shabaab spokesperson said the militants took 2 pickups with mounted anti-aircraft guns. He claimed that the attackers had killed 15 soldiers. Al-Shabaab has been fighting the UN-backed Somali government for over a decade. In Yemen, 6 government soldiers have been killed after their convoy was hit by a landmine explosion. Officials at the convoy was also carrying the country's defense minister, but he remained unharmed. The defense minister of the internationally recognized government of Yemen was visiting a frontline area of Sirwa. It is located west of the government-held city of Marib and east of the Houthi rebel-held capital Sana'a. Officials said several others were wounded when the convoy hit explosive buried in the road. Yemen has been mired in conflict since 2011. Landmines were extensively planted in many parts of the country during the fighting. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Riyadh for a 3-day visit after finishing his Africa tour. The State Department said the Saudi will meet with Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It said the Secretary of State will also meet with Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan. Earlier, Pompeo said during his time in Saudi Arabia, he will speak with the kingdom's leadership about security issues and Iran. He said the economic relationship between the two countries will also be discussed. Pompeo will depart for Oman after his visit to Saudi Arabia. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says talks to set the EU's budget for the coming 7 years will be very difficult, while France said it will remain vigilant for unfair competition from the UK if it goes ahead with plans to set up free ports post-Brexit.
Addressing a news conference in Berlin, Merkel said Germany rejected the reduction of rebates in negotiations on the EU budget. She said Germany had a fundamental interest in a successful outcome to an EU summit.
I will say, however, that I do not know if this will succeed. We think our concerns are not sufficiently addressed on many points, and I therefore see very tough and difficult negotiations ahead.
Meanwhile, French European Affairs Minister Amélie de Montchalin says Paris will not indiscriminately sign a post-Brexit deal on 31st December. Montchalin insisted on the importance of establishing customs control on the Irish Sea. At a hearing of the French Senate, the minister said France must not succumb to the pressures of a timetable.
Such a deal will stay with us for 20 or 30 years, for several decades. If we sign it half-heartedly and then we regret having it for 20 to 30 years, there's a matter of political coherence to avoid.
The EU leaders will gather in Brussels on Thursday for a special Council summit. The European Council president will seek to ease the blow of spending cuts on poorer countries.
In India, 19 people have died after a bus collided with a container truck in western Tamil Nadu state. Police say 23 other passengers were injured by the accident in the city of Tirupur. They said the truck traveling from Kerala lost control and entered the opposite lane, causing the collision. 48 people were traveling on the bus. Officials warned the death toll may rise as some of the passengers are critically injured. Flooded communities in the parts of the UK are facing more heavy rain as they struggle to cope in the wake of Storm Dennis. The UK's Environment Agency has forecast a month's worth of rain in 24 hours to hit North Wales and northwest England. Following on from another big storm, Dennis caused flooding and misery for the second straight weekend. Nearly 120 flood warnings remain in place across the country. The Environment Agency says there is a heightened flood risk across the Midlands, with 6 severe warnings in place around the rivers Lugh, Severn and Wye. Hundreds of people have been evacuated from their homes in South Wales, Hertfordshire and Worcestershire. Dashcam footage has captured a meteor passing over the city of Johor Bahru at the southern end of the peninsular Malaysia. The International Meteor Organization said it has received 7 reports of a fireball. The organization said it is a meteor that appears brighter than normal. The view from a highway showed the fireball's brief yet brilliant path as it lit up the skies over the city. The new coronavirus outbreak in China and other countries has alarmed global powers over the economic impact. From monetary institutions to the European Union, major economic stakeholders have expressed concern. IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva says the global economy remains fragile due to the epidemic. She warned the situation could worsen with more dire consequences for other countries as the impacts spill over. Meanwhile, European Commission Trade Chief Phil Hogan, said the virus may delay trade deal with China amid deferred talks. Australian airliner Qantas has also warned of a severe financial impact as coronavirus dampens demand for travel in Asia. Qantas said the outbreak will cost it up to $99 million as it cuts flights to Asia by 15% until May. Asian markets are trading mixed as investors continue to speculate over the economic impact of the new coronavirus. Major stocks are losing stability in the region amid heightened volatility. The Shanghai Composite is trading over 1% higher after China cut its lending benchmark rate as a policy measure to inject stimulus into the economy. The Nikkei 225 is trading nearly 0.5% higher, with shares of index heavyweight SoftBank Group soaring nearly 3%. Seoul's Kospi and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong each lost nearly 0.5%. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.